I was working security on a construction site on the far side of this lake. All my shifts were graveyards, so I had gotten used to not seeing the light for a few months. This side of the lake is very dangerous due to people dropping bodies off and fishermen drowning. This is on a Native American reservation, and during this particular time we only had 2 policemen working the whole reservation, and after 10 p.m. you have to fend for yourself. But one week in particular is one I want to tell you about, as it involved missing fishermen, noises at night, and a meth worker. The start of the week was very strange, as there was a small storm and all the boats were urged to get off the water. One boat, however, didn't make it back, and 2 fishermen went missing. As security, we make our rounds around the site and were told to be on the lookout for their bodies. So every time I made my hourly rounds, I went to the water with my binoculars, flashlight, and looked for the bodies of these fishermen. I wanted to find them so their family could have some closure, but at the same time, if I did, I would most likely have to bring them to shore by myself, as they could drift away. The next night I decided to go a little further than I usually do, and shined my light in the water. After looking for a few minutes, I heard a mountain lion scream, and I turned around quickly, shining my light. After a minute, I saw greenish eyes in the distance, and then a splash from the water. At this instant, everything got dead quiet, and the only thing I could hear was my breath and my heartbeat. I went back to my truck, and on the way taking my knife out ready to fight for my life. I made it to my truck and went back to the site safely. The next night, one of my co-workers showed up on the site in a company vehicle and just sat there all night, and leaving it at approximately 6 a.m. I took note of this as he was a recovering meth addict, and I had a feeling he was using again. The night after that, he parked inside of the site and came into our security trailer. I tried to strike up a conversation with him, but he was preoccupied with this game on his tablet. I took note of this in our security log, and around 3 a.m. he walked to the nearest town, which was about 7 miles away, leaving his truck and the company vehicle at the site. In the morning they found out the company vehicle wasn't running, and later found out someone had put water in the gas tank. So later that day they called me in to report it, and I tried to show them the security logs, but all my entries had been ripped out. So the only thing I could do was give an oral report. That night around 2 a.m. or so, my co-worker showed up with his girlfriend, and they just sat in a car overlooking the site. I knew it was them as I recognised the car, and I could see they were smoking in the darkness. Before I had left for work, my supervisor messaged me and said to be careful if that co-worker came to the site that night. To be honest, I didn't have much going for me, so I came to work ready for a fight and had a couple of knives, steel-toe boots, and my dad's 12-gauge in the car. So if he wanted to fight, I was ready. At around 3 a.m. they pulled to the entrance of the site, and I walked up to them, blinding them with my light. I played it off as a joke and had them laughing for a bit, but I could smell this sweet chemical smell and could tell they were hiding something. After a minute, his girlfriend, who was driving, started to get mad that I had sabotaged her man's company truck. I hadn't done anything and defended myself. After a while she got mad and they both got out of the car looking for a fight. I was able to talk and calm them down before they attacked me though, and I escorted them off the site. The next day they fired him and police escorted him off the site as he was carrying a machete around. That night they showed up again, but I did not engage them. I just made note and watched them until they left. That was the last time I ever saw them, and I have no idea where they are today. But the thing that scared me the most was the thought of when my grandma gets the news that I was killed by some meth heads on the lake of our ancestors. The thought of how sad she would be. This sounds made up, but I promise this is all 100% life, true experiences. I had seen spirits as a kid, off and on growing up, none of which scared me as I was too young to understand they were ghosts and always thought they were just people. Until I was about 7. I woke up one morning to a giant, probably 8 foot tall, black shadowy man standing next to my bed staring at me. This was the first time something made me feel scared. It was only there for a second and then just vanished. I screamed to my mum and didn't see him again after that, but often I could somehow feel it was still around me. When I was a young teenager, I had a boyfriend who wasn't so nice, but I didn't tell anyone about how badly he was mistreating me, because I didn't want my family to make me dump him or for my friends to not want him around us. One day he got a phone call from an unknown number. When he answered the phone, there was a deep, dark voice on the other end, almost like someone using a voice morphing. It said, "Stay the fuck away from her." And my boyfriend was like, "Who is this?" And the voice replied, "Stay the fuck away from her or I will kill you," and hung up. He tried to dial the number back, but no answer. The next day he tried again, and a man answered. My boyfriend was flipping out. "Who do you think you are threatening me?" And the person on the other end explained it was impossible for anyone to call him on this number. It was a landline to an abandoned house. He was a realtor who checked on the house once a week, or for showings, and only used the phone for business calls. We didn't believe him and looked up the phone number and got an address. When we drove there, we realised he was right. The house was abandoned. I dumped my boyfriend shortly after that. A few years later, I met a guy online, Jake. We started talking, but he lived a few hours from me and we made a date to meet. He was really excited and everything was in place, until out of the blue he stopped responding to me. I was really upset and demanded answers. He finally replied 2 weeks later saying, "I can't talk to you. You'll never believe me if I say why, but I can't talk to you." I moved on from him and got a new boyfriend, Dan. He was a bit rough around the edges, but a cool guy. Definitely not the type to believe in ghosts or the paranormal. He was the type to try and act tough all the time. One day we were on the phone when he said, "Hold on, there's a creepy dude following me." He said he couldn't make anything out, but saw a very tall black shadow of a man following him. Being Mr. Tough Guy, he went on about how he was going to kick the guy's ass. A few days later he tells me again that he saw someone following him home, but all he could make out was their shadow and that he was a little nervous someone was going to try and rob him or something. Later on I get a call from his phone and it's one of our friends. They're saying something's wrong with Dan and they were taking him to the hospital. When I asked what happened, they said they were all standing outside a 7-Eleven when Dan stopped talking and wouldn't respond. They kept asking what was wrong and apparently all he said was, "Do you see him?" And they asked who, and he pointed and said, "That man right there. Can you see him?" And then he passed out. Later when Dan woke up, he was terrified, and I never saw him scared of anything. He says a giant black shadow of a man had been following him all day, and when he realised no one else could see it, he was scared. He'd said that at the 7-Eleven, after he asked the others if they saw him, the shadow charged at him and knocked him unconscious. He was dazed for a couple of days after that. Pretty quickly after that, I found out he wasn't a very good person, and we broke up. Not long after this, I get a text from Jake telling me he's ready to talk. He begs me to believe him and that he isn't crazy. He told me that one night after we'd been talking, he saw a very tall shadow of a man in his doorway, and it started to happen every time he talked to me. He was another guy that always tried to act tough. I guess I'm pretty bad at picking boyfriends and go for the bad guys. So one night he claims he got aggressive towards the shadow, saying something along the lines of, "What the fuck are you looking at?" And it spoke to him in a deep, dark voice and said, "Stay away from her or I will kill you," and disappeared. I guess this still wasn't enough to scare Jake. I don't know how. If that had been me, I would have pooped my pants and deleted his number. But the next night it was back in his doorway and said something like, "I told you to stay away from her." He thought it would be a good idea to ask, "What are you going to do about it?" Well, it did something. He says it charged him and knocked him out. When he woke up, he was covered from head to toe in scratches. He also sent me a picture as proof. I wish I still had the picture, but this was around 8 years ago. He was so terrified he decided to stop talking to me for months. I dodged a bullet with him because I found out after this from a friend that he was a dangerous guy and in and out of jail a lot. New boyfriend Eric. Everything seems to be going fantastic. Very nice, fun guy, but things over time just didn't work out and I broke it off with him. We hung out on occasion, but things took a dark twist. He went from being a very laid-back, funny, life-loving guy one day to a miserable, fucked-up nutjob the next. I couldn't understand how someone's personality changes overnight. I was very upset. It was like he was a completely different person. I stopped contacting him. One night I'm watching TV. I was wide awake, but then all of a sudden it was like I was dreaming. I was in the pitch black dark, but there was enough light around me to see that I was in a field. All of a sudden around me are about 10 of these giant shadow men. They start speaking in this deep dark voice to me. It's a language I've never heard, but somehow understood it. They're telling me to stay away from Eric because he's headed down a dark road. They showed me him in his room having an almost psychotic episode. Flashes into the future of him abusing drugs and hearing voices doing terrible things to other people, and a look deeper into the future of him high on drugs and killing a female in his house. They explained to me that there's demons controlling him and that I need to stay away. I wake up gasping for air, completely freaked out. I tell my friend about the nightmare and she suggests a Ouija board, which is a terrible idea and I'll never recommend this, but I was young and stupid. We head down to this park that we always go to and pull out the Ouija board. We start asking if anyone is around and we get a yes. We ask who but get no answer. We ask what they want and it spells out protect. We ask protect from what and it says E and shoots with massive force to goodbye. We're frantic trying to get more answers, saying no, not goodbye, and it starts going crazy, the same letters over and over that we couldn't figure out. My friend freaked out and said that's the sign that a demon is on the board. We quickly go back to goodbye and look up and see a tall shadow man by a tree. My friend is frozen and asks if I see it. I said yes, and we got in the car and floored it. I tell my cousin about the crazy experience and she's making a joke of it. We make plans to get food and I go pick her up. Outside of our house is a shadow man. I tell her to quickly get in the car and we leave. We're driving around listening to music and I realise my car is acting funny. I pull into a parking lot to make sure nothing is wrong. My cousin, who is singing in the car, immediately stops and I get a terrible feeling come over me and so does she. She looks at me and goes, "Get us out of here, something is wrong." As I get in the car, the street light over us goes out. As I'm flooring it out of the parking lot, all of the lights in the parking lot go out one by one. It was scary as hell. We finally go get some sandwiches and figure we'll pull over by the park and eat in my car before I drive her home, because she didn't want to be home by herself. We figured this was a good spot to stop since it's well lit across from a bunch of houses. As we're eating, this same terrible feeling comes over us, and a black car with black tinted windows drives slowly past us. It was strange because window tints are illegal in my state. It pulls up next to us and stops, then it slowly drives down the road. I'm freaking out, so we get the fuck out of there. I turn around and stop at a stop sign. Somehow this car got from the far end of the road directly behind me in about 4 seconds. I'm speeding now, something definitely isn't right. Then this car starts lightly bumping into the back of mine and driving beside me on a 1-lane road. I told my cousin to call 911. As dumb as it sounds, I thank all my days playing Grand Theft Auto for this one. I knew if I could get him to fly past me somehow, I could make it into a convenience store parking lot and call the cops. So I let this car fly up the side of me again and slammed my brakes. It zoomed past me and slammed on its brakes ahead, which gave me a few seconds to swerve around and get into the parking lot. My cousin tried to see a plate number but couldn't. When we get into the parking lot, we see the car turn back around and park across from the parking lot and turn its lights off, I assume waiting for us. I go inside and I call the cops. About 30 seconds before the cops arrive, the car disappears. I never saw it drive away. In 1 minute, it was just gone. A few months after this incident, I begin dating someone else. His name is Greg. Things were going okay until he started acting really funny. When I asked what was going on, he replied, "I think I'm going crazy." I asked why, and he says, "I keep seeing these shadow men." He says he first saw one in his basement that threatened him, and that he was seeing them all around my house. I figured, here we go again. One night he wakes up out of a dead sleep and appears to be sleepwalking, which he had already done 2 nights that week. I heard you weren't supposed to wake someone if they are sleepwalking, so I keep an eye from a distance to make sure he doesn't hurt himself. I see him just standing there, but the light from the window behind him disappears as if something blocked it. I walk a little closer and see a gigantic black shadow hunching over him. It was such an unsettling sight to see. This giant shadow man hunched so unnaturally over someone's head. I only saw it for a few seconds, but when it disappeared, he woke up. Things got progressively worse between us, and he was a different person. After breaking up with him, he spent some time in a mental health hospital. Scarily, I found out from a friend that he is looking at prison time for multiple counts of rape. I moved out of state hoping this would change things, but the same things happened across the country. The boyfriend I found there started out great, but turned violent and miserable after seeing a shadow man in our hallway. When I realised that moving didn't help, I returned home. About 2 months after returning home, I spoke to Eric. He seemed much better and more like his old self. We talked for a few days, made plans to hang out. All was going very well, and out of nowhere he stopped responding to me again. We ran into him at a mutual friend's house, and as soon as he saw me, he threw a fit and stormed out. Nobody knows why. When a mutual friend asked about it, he responded, "Don't ever bring her up to me ever again." And it was left at that. Apparently he suffers from these strange episodes. Since then, where he has extreme panic attacks and will lock himself inside his room for days at a time. Again, nobody knows why. Any slight mention of my name and he will leave the room or leave completely. He's also developed a terrible drug and alcohol problem. He won't go to any event that I'm at and will not tolerate anyone mentioning my name. Things have since calmed down now. I have been dating someone for almost 3 years. We didn't have any incidents, knock on wood, so far. My boyfriend does have very bad anxiety attacks now and has seen a shadow coming down the hallway, but nothing violent or menacing. It seems to lurk around a bit but doesn't do anything other than occasionally knock something small over or open a door to show its presence. But I met the demon. I had a dream that me and my boyfriend were in this old attic and this giant demon came out. This was totally different than the shadow men. This was huge, almost like a black misty fog made of material that resembled oil. It grabbed me by the back of the head and pinned me down. I couldn't move or speak, and it said to me, "You have no powers against me. No one can help you." But I started to think in this same strange language from the previous dream, almost like a prayer, and this thing let go and seemed to have released me, and seemed agitated that I knew a way to have it release me. But damn, it let me know it meant some serious business, and scared the crap out of me. My mother told me the next morning she had a terrible nightmare and explained she had this exact same dream and that when she prayed it released her. She's very Christian, so her first instinct was to pray. This was the last event that happened. The whole thing is very confusing. Who are these shadow men? Are they good or bad? Are they protective or evil? And who are these demons? Are they related? Are they what's responsible for all these people's complete 180s in behaviour? Are they getting possessed? It's craziness. I don't know what to make of it, or why it has always revolved around the men I date. Does anyone know what to make of this? This began around the beginning of middle school and ended just before I entered high school. I would experience bouts of sleep paralysis nearly. I would wake up from a nightmare and find that I couldn't move my body at all, at times for several minutes. Because my brain was still getting off of the high of whatever terrible dream I'd had, I'd have these hallucinations that were so incredibly real at times. I could feel them physically on my body, pressing on me, creeping over me at the foot of my bed. That sort of thing. I couldn't escape them, and no matter how scared I was, I eventually learned to just shut my eyes and wait until I could move again, or hazard going back to sleep. One hallucination or spirit, or whatever entity my mind cooked up, was a regular customer during these episodes. My bedroom was fairly small and curved in a sort of C shape, my bed placed at the concave of the room and facing out towards my desk, dresser and windows. My closet door was on the wall tangent with my bed, and every night, though I kept it closed, I would stare at it before going to sleep. That was where it would appear. It looked humanoid, and though I can't explain why I got the distinct feeling that this thing was a man, he was entirely void of light or form. An all-black figure with no distinguishing features, a tall silhouette standing in the far left corner of my bedroom. He began his visits just lurking by the closet door, but as the weeks progressed he would start to move. He would edge closer to the side of my bed and stand there, this huge mass of inky blackness, and I would shut my eyes and know that he was still there. He had this energy about him, a presence that didn't just feel like mind fog or what have you. At times it felt like he was right in my face. As I said, this persisted for years, these visits from the shadowy figure. I never gave him a name, but I did try to expel him once with an entire vial of holy water given to me during my first communion. I was Catholic raised and thought it might work, but over time I started feeling like this thing wasn't going to hurt me and had a sort of fondness for him. He felt like a secret guardian of my room, and I liked to pretend that he lived in my closet and would watch over me while I slept. I had an interest in ghosts too, and thought it entirely plausible that he could be attached to my room in some way or another, and the only way I could see him was if I was half asleep. He stopped during the summer before freshman year, and I have never seen nor heard of him since, at least not directly. Flash forward to my sophomore year of college. I'd recently made friends with someone in my major, and having discovered that we lived in the same apartment complex, we decided to meet up and do some homework. We were chilling out in my room when the topic of conversation idly turned to strange things we'd experienced during our childhood. I came to find out that this friend is extremely connected to the spiritual world. They aren't a medium, but conversing with spirits or beings is kind of a regular deal for them. Suspend your disbelief as I have. I told my friend about the sleep paralysis I used to experience and about the shadowy figure. I'm pretty sure I joked about him being a ghost or something, but their response, entirely serious, was to the effect of, "I used to be friends with an entity like that. He would go on and on about a little girl he went to visit every once in a while. He talked about her so fondly, how she used to be so afraid of him and he didn't understand why." They paused. "He probably stopped visiting you because he's dead now." So I want to start off with the fact I have doubts about this actually happening. Part of me feels it was just one shitty kid making shit up and our young brains running wild. But I remember how scared and paranoid I felt back then. Part of me fears it may have actually happened. It happened when I was 9 or 10 during the summer. My parents had split up, so my mum and us kids, me, my brother and my sister, were staying with my aunt for the summer until my mum could find us a new place. Directly across the street from my aunt's house is a park, and behind the park is a wood. All the kids on the street played at this park, and we all kind of played together. Sometimes we hated each other, and other times we were best friends. Stupid kid stuff. Anyway, this all started about halfway through the summer. Me and my sister, my cousin and a few neighbour kids were playing in the park. It was getting late. We're playing on the swings that were across from the woods when one of the neighbour kids screamed and pointed at the woods. We all asked what was wrong. The kid said she saw a man watching us from the woods. The eldest of us, being 11, got scared and ran home and told our parents. At first none of them believed us. By the next day we'd forgotten about the man and went back to the park. This time other kids saw him, so we all go running to tell our parents again. This time they took us more seriously, and all the dads on the street went into the woods with bats looking for the creep, but found nothing. The sighting of the creepy man kept happening, and to be honest gave me doubts of the man's existence at all. One kid claims he saw the guy in the park at night. Others claim they saw him during the day. Most just claimed to see him from the woods. But one of the kids claimed the creepy man tried to grab them and threatened to kill them. This terrified our parents, so one of them called the police. The police came and searched the woods. After the police had been, not many more sightings occurred. Now you might be thinking, well yeah, he was scared off by the police. But part of me thinks that maybe the kid who first saw the man was trying to mess with us, and it got so out of hand he was afraid to admit it was a prank. I think possibly all the sightings were simply us being scared and creating stories in our heads, or some kids made up stories of seeing him because they wanted to be a part of it. I think it shows how scary a kid's imagination can get. I was so scared of this man at the time, and I sometimes think about it and wonder, what if this was real? What if there was a man? And I start to freak out. A while back, I would tell my brother that I felt like I was being watched. One day he said, "Oh, I know we are." We. That's what scared me, was that he was possibly endangered as well. I asked what he meant. He said, "Since Pa, my mum's grandpa, died, there's this silver glowing man that watches me. He looks like Pa, and he has his same walking cane, but he doesn't come inside, unless it's a public place like Walmart or even our science lab at school. When it's a private place like home, he just watches from the windows or sometimes from the door." A few days pass and we drop the subject. We're about to go to bed one night and he jumps up and points out to the window saying, "Look, right over there, that silver man. He's back again, right by the barn." I couldn't see anything but a faint outline, almost translucent, but it was probably my imagination. After about 2 months he said it was all a ruse and that he was pulling my leg, but the descriptions he gave were too realistic, and he would look out the windows sometimes and his face would go pale. Then he'd start rocking back and forth with his legs pulled to his chest like he saw something. Now this house is old, like 1800s old. There is a lot of stuff that we've seen and heard that we can't explain. I went through a camera and found ghost orbs. When I'm alone, we'll hear the door open. Now the door is heavy enough that we keep it open so we don't struggle to open and close it later. Then we'd hear it slam and rattle the house. My aunt was walking across the yard. There was me, my brother, my dad, my aunt and her husband living in one house. Our other aunt and uncle lived across the yard. There was a shadowy figure about my height staring at them. The piano had started playing when I was the only one here too. Also there was this notebook I was wanting to draw in. I flipped through making sure nothing was in it. It was blank. The next day on the first page there was some neat cursive writing reading, "Leave me alone. You hurt me the other night." I burnt it in the fireplace after that. What do all of you think? I want to inform you that I forgot to post the story immediately because I was really shocked and couldn't even talk for a while. The following happened when I was living in my second house. This story is about El Silbón. El Silbón, also known as is a legendary figure in Colombia and Venezuela, associated especially with Los Llanos, described as a lost soul. The legend came about sometime in the middle of the 19th century. According to the legend, the spirit is a youth who murdered and disemboweled his father for killing his wife, saying that she was a slut and that she was asking for it. Afterwards, his grandfather ordered the youth to be tied to a post in the middle of the countryside and lashed until his back was totally destroyed. His wounds were then cleaned with alcohol and he was released to 2 rabid, starving dogs set upon him. Before releasing him, his grandfather condemned him to carry the bones of his father for all eternity. It has a characteristic whistle that resembles the musical notes C, D, E, F, G, A and B, in that order, rising in tone to F, then lowering to B. It is said that when the whistling sounds close, he is far away, but when the whistling sounds distant, it means he's behind you. It is also said that hearing the whistling foretells your own death, and you can hear it anywhere at any time. In this situation, the only thing that can save you is the sound of a dog barking, as it is the only thing that it is afraid of. The spirit also tends to take revenge on womanizers. Moreover, he usually sneaks into houses and starts counting the bones he is cursed to carry. If the family or the people that live in the house notice him, they will get good luck, but if not, someone from the house will die. I was in my second house. My second house is pretty far away from the actual town, and it is surrounded by fields except for my aunt, who is our neighbour. It is also near the sea, so we go there for our summer holidays. I went to our house for a few days so I could clean it a bit, because there are always many dead insects on our floor. Anyway, I was sitting on our couch looking at my phone when I suddenly heard a whistle behind me. I immediately looked back there, but there was nothing there. Then I heard the whistling again. I looked in every corner of our house, but there was nothing. Then I looked out of the window and saw it. It was far away in the field. It was at least 2 feet tall and had a sack slung over its back with what I could see as bones. It looked at me and started to run towards me. Thank God my aunt's bulldog saw it and started barking at it. When it heard the dog, it ran away in a panic. I knew nothing about these creatures and their characteristics until I searched it on Google. I really hope none of you will ever hear this creepy whistling. Even though I am not at summer house right now, I went there for a meeting and decided to take my dog just in case it ever visits me again. Before I start, I want to inform you that the following story is not something that I experienced. I know that Krampus is a Christmas creature, but my friend sent me his story recently and it was really scary. Now, about Krampus. In Central European folklore, Krampus is a horned, anthropomorphic figure described as half goat, half demon, who during the Christmas season punishes children who have misbehaved, in contrast with Saint Nicholas, who rewards the well-behaved with gifts. Krampus is one of the companions of Saint Nicholas in several regions, including Austria, Bavaria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Hungary, northern Italy, including South Tyrol in the province of Trento, and Slovakia and Slovenia. The origin of the figure is unclear. Some folklorists and anthropologists have postulated it as having pre-Christian origins. In such events as the Christmas parades, the Krampuslauf, translated Krampusrung, young men get dressed as Krampus. Such events occur annually in most alpine towns. Krampus is also featured on the holiday greeting cards called Krampuskarten. I am from Russia and I had a brother that I really loved. He's not from there, but I don't want to reveal his country. We played together and did many things. Eventually, me and my family had to move to another country. There we lived in a really rough area with a lot of bad people. I guess it was like a ghetto. My brother and I hated the fact that we had moved, and because of our unhappiness, we rebelled and became thieves. Sometimes we didn't want to steal others' possessions, but as children we had so little. It was coming up to Christmas and our mother started to tell us stories about a monster called Krampus. She would describe to us how tall and scary he was, and how he kidnaps children who misbehave. She told us we would be safe if we were good children and stopped stealing. I obeyed my mother, but my brother was still misbehaving. The night before Christmas, our mother was having these panic attacks almost every 10 minutes and was crying all day. When I asked her what was wrong, she would answer me with the words, "He is coming." Then she would pray. This really scared me because the next day was Christmas Day. My brother and I wanted to take a bath, but my mother screamed that it wasn't a good idea. My father told us to be quick. My brother ran quickly to take his bath first, as he knew that the hot water wouldn't be enough for both of us. He closed the door in front of me and started laughing. He was wasting all the hot water, but then I heard the window in the bathroom open. It went silent for a moment, and after a few seconds I heard the sound of someone walking in there. But it wasn't a normal walk. It sounded like whoever it was tried to sneak in. I wasn't too worried because I thought it was my brother messing with me, so I knocked on the door and told him to hurry up. Then the walking sound stopped, and for a few seconds I thought my brother was getting out so I could get in. Then I heard a different sound. It was the sound of chains rattling together. I thought that my brother was messing with me again, so I suddenly opened the door and stomped in there. What I saw totally freaked me out. The bathroom window was wide open. This thing I saw before me was at least 2 meters tall and had deep smelling breath. It had chains wrapped around its body and its legs were inside the bath. His legs were like horses' legs, which is where the walking sound came from. I looked up and it had these huge horns sticking out of its head, so huge they were scraping the ceiling. Then its hands. It had long hands and long fingers covered in hair. The next thing I saw still makes me cry with fear today. Its nails were sharp, so very sharp, and it had my brother nailed down, literally under the bathwater. He was drowning. From what I could see, my brother wasn't fighting it, which could only mean he was already gone. The only thing I could think was that he wasn't in pain anymore. When this monster noticed me, he began to laugh in such a weird way and proceeded to hand my brother's dead body to me like it was a gift. My brother's eyes had no difference from the eyes of a dead animal. I screamed at the top of my lungs and my parents immediately ran towards the bathroom to see what was happening. The beast had already slipped out of the window. When my mother saw my brother's clothes on the floor and the open windows, she understood what had happened and fell to the floor crying. We called the police and they found my dead brother in the town river. From then on I lived to see all my friends dying off in the area. Every time I heard of another death, I couldn't ignore what the cause must have been. The way my brother died still scares me today. The police officer told us that my brother had died 1 hour before the body was found. Hey fearsome friends! Hope you enjoyed today's video and the Krampus story was what you had expected. Please send me your stories. We love hearing them. Thanks to everyone who took part in this video, and remember, keep being creepy.